Hello, folks. So I just found out something quite interesting in relation to the private loaded title for private conveyance. If you guys recollect, just over a year ago, back in 2024, I moved my car from the public realm into the private realm using this documentation here, registering my own Allodial title, then sending in this notification with the VIN number, as you can see, and the old license plate registration number here in Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. Obviously stipulating my terms and conditions and attaching the document of allodial title, private indemnity bond, and the schedule fee, as you can see here. And I've been driving the last year hassle-free, not paying any tolls to bridges, tunnels, car parks that didn't have obviously barriers at the entrance and exits, which were open car parks, public car parks, private car parks that had automated cameras, and also private kind of ticket issuers that kind of pop up now and again. Actually got a few tickets, but they can't enforce it because this car isn't on their system. And also, drove past plenty of ANPR cameras, cop cars, absolutely nothing, scot-free, living the good life, living free, and having a blast, right? It's a good feeling. And even, I think one time I accidentally parked on a bus stop in the city just to run in and go pick something up. I came back and there was a city council car parked behind my car, and right in front of it, a tow truck. And they're all out, stood by my car with their kind of iPads, scratching their heads. And I came over and they're all kind of saying, "Oh, is this your car?" I was like, yeah, it is. What's the problem? It's like, do you know what state it's registered with? I was like, it's registered with a private estate, a private trust. And I said, apologies, guys. I didn't realize there was a bus stop here. But they were just saying like, wow, we've not seen this before. Like, we can't initiate anything because you're not even on the system. And this goes into the power of what we're doing here with this private conveyance, in a standing that obviously everything is in bankruptcy. So the governments are administrating a bankruptcy as debtors on behalf of the creditors because they've been restructured under a Chapter 10, 11, 12 bankruptcy. So everything we think we own, we don't have legal title of unless you go through this process. Whoever has legal title, remember, possession is 9/10 of the law. Legal title is the other 10th, can dictate the terms and conditions, otherwise use, of what that collateral is. Okay, which is obviously the possessors, which are the register keepers, the deed of title owners, us, generally in the public, who receive these certificates or so-called titles from the government. We've only got colours of title, right? That otherwise stipulates that we're the beneficial user of the thing that is otherwise legally owned by the creditors. And for that use, we must abide by the amorty jurisdiction of the trust decree, the trust indenture of the bankruptcy, which is stipulated by the international creditors, who obviously act through the central banks et al. Okay, which is obviously all disguised as statutory jurisdiction. So they can't, anything within their system has to be obviously registered. And if there's no record of anything of the collateral that is kind of obviously being administered under the bankruptcy, then it's not pledged, it's not under a lien, and it's not under that vice of the conditions of the creditors, which they've obviously maneuvered everything with all the governments and everything registered with it. So when you register something, remember, you're given your title and rights away. Regis means the crown, registration, that they have ultimate jurisdiction over us receiving what we think we own, but we're only using it under usury. And for that use, we pay rent, which is obviously disguised as taxes. And if we don't abide by the code, the conditions of usury under the amity maritime jurisdiction disguised as statutory jurisdiction, we can be fined, feed, levied, imprisoned, etc. Okay, and that's where people are falling short and having problems and not going through this process of obviously removing it under that jurisdiction from bankruptcy and into your own private natural law, common law of the land, estate, with allodial title ownership under silent acquiescent admission, right? Which is so easy, which brings it under equity law. And if you're doing everything via registration, registered post, we obviously know that is how, and you keep a record of it. Every court, their only power relies on the ability of them to hold records okay, that we effectively become our own sovereign nation state. We have every right, as every government has, in order to administer our own collateral under our own terms and conditions and remove it from their bankruptcy and their fraud, okay, which is obviously all designed to keep people in debt peonage and perpetual servitude. All right, so I had this idea because I wanted to sell this vehicle, and buy a new one and do the same process of taking that new vehicle from the public into the private, as I've done here with this vehicle. But obviously that means me going from now the private into the public. Now, I stipulated in the letter that I wanted to keep the old license plate purely for that reason. If I ever wanted to sell it back into the public, right? But what I found out today, which is quite interesting, that I went to go search for the vehicle, for the old license plate and even the VIN number on their system. So this is the State of Queensland Transport Motoring website, where they handle all the registrations of all conveyances, cars, right, on the roads here in Australia. And went to search for it, and it wasn't showing up. Even with both the license plate and the VIN number, there is absolutely nothing showing up on their records. As you can see, I'm clicking. I've tried to refresh the page. Absolutely nothing showing up on the records of even the old license plate registration of this vehicle that I successfully obviously moved into the private. Okay, so just wanted to share that with you folks, because that obviously is a good confirmation as to removing it from the public into the private, and that even on their database it's wiped clean. However, it might be a bit of a caveat in regards to, okay, if I want to resell this vehicle, then I'm going to have to obviously re-register it with the state and go through that whole process in order to then sell it off to someone else in the public, okay, wanted to use their system. So that might create a little bit more hoops to jump through in regards to that. But it's always advisable to keep the old license plate, because after a certain amount of time, obviously I think for me it was about maybe a year, just over a year, that probably this came into effect. Obviously it's October 2025 and I've only just found this out. And I think I had this process done way back in probably April, May time, or summer, kind of winter time down here in the Southern Hemisphere. So June, July, latest 2024. So it's been over a year, right? Since I've had this claimed into the private. That obviously, yeah, if you want to bring it back into the public to resell, you might have to go through the same process of re-registering, and it might take a year, might take less. I'm not too sure. I remember I think when I first purchased the car, I think the registration ran out, I think 2 or 3 months later. That was prepaid up front. Here in Australia, that's how they do it. It's kind of obviously tax. It's just basically tax, which obviously all goes towards the bankruptcy of paying off the national debt. That's due to the international creditors who are tax exempt. So it's all a huge scam anyway. That basically I was receiving initially, I think the first 6 months after it lapsing the expiry date for the registration, I was receiving notifications probably 3 or 4 times to, make sure you register your vehicle. And then it just died out. And this is what I otherwise used the A4V, once having the set-off agreement or the set-off bond and the set-off agreement set up, okay, with the latest bond technologies. As you can see with the A4V example, was actually one of these negotiable instruments, one of the bills that was sent my way that I tried to set off, as you can see here. So they were sending me an invoice for $280, which is in relation to paying the registration on the vehicle. Yeah, around, you can see July 2024, when I had this process done. Okay, so quite interesting that within at least a year, the database gets cleaned out, and they actually remove, if you're not updating the registration of the old license plate in the public, they remove that completely from the database, which is really quite interesting. Okay, which otherwise, again, for some people that might be perfect. I mean, it might even help explain why even, when you're driving around and it's a completely different license plate and it's not even registered within their system. I mean, whether they actually have on their system, because we're notifying them of what we're doing, they might even have on their system, but on the private side, that we've obviously notified them that they have some record, but it's not falling under the bankrupt debtor maritime amity disguised as statutory jurisdiction, if you get what I'm saying, because we've done everything right, that they know that they can't touch this, and that they weren't willing to rebut my claim to remove it from the public realm into the private, with me holding legal title now. So I've got the right, the complete absolute ownership of this vessel, of this vehicle, this piece of collateral, this piece of land, right, that's been, brought up from the minerals of the earth and compiled into this car that I'm using to travel and transport, private transit travel, non-commercial, for private use. So you can see here that they just can't touch it. And I'm the one that can stipulate the terms and conditions. And the only way I can get criminally penalized is if I damage someone else's property whilst using the vehicle, and or being, so injured them, whether it ran them over or hit them, their car, or even state property like a lamppost and stuff. Okay, so everything else and anything else, like speeding, who is the injured party, what is the crime, can they come forward in their private capacity, all that is just amity maritime jurisdiction, statutory jurisdiction under the penal code. It's a form of martial law, because we're they hold legal title, and the governments are there administering the bankruptcy, the prison camp, which dictate the rights of use for the things we think we own but we don't, because registered keeper, it was in England, the V5C, that's not proof of ownership. You haven't got absolute control of that. I mean, yes, you can put a lien against it and that might protect it, but the absolute remedy for people within the system knowing the setup have to issue their own allodial title. And under silent acquiescent admission, we can get their agreement, send all registered post, and keep a record. And this goes in my glove box, and it's been in my glove box, for ever since I had this process done, even with the bonds. So guys, when you do things like this, just think it's the same process, rinse and repeat, that you could do multiple times. But just keep in mind, obviously, the caveat is if you want to keep the old license plate to then resell back into the public at some point in the future, you might be privy to just keep paying it, so you can keep that account live, or you can just leave it. It'll just be wiped clean of the database, and you can go off and have fun and be completely private. Or obviously go through, when you want to sell it back into the public, just go through re-registering. Okay, whether that's even possible, I'm sure it is, in order to establish the account within their system again and to bring it back into the public realm. So then you can use the public interface system to sell it to other uneducated public citizens, which, there's 99% of them out there. We're only in the 1% who know this kind of stuff, in order to have that process appeased. Okay, because obviously, cars, like fashion, a couple of years down the line, 5 years, even maybe 6, who knows, some people keep their cars forever, but you might want to sell it back into the public. So it's just a kind of caveat to think about, guys, going forwards, and something that you might want to check for those folks who have this process done. But otherwise, just kind of proving the power of what we're doing here, and the confirmation again of them actually wiping it clean from their database. Even the VIN number, even just the VIN number, it doesn't show up. It shows nothing. Okay. And so if you think this whole process, right, once you've got your security agreement set up, you're indemnified with the indemnity bond, you've got a set-off bond in place, you perfected the security agreement for UCC fining or PPSR, depending on where you are, under securities law, and you know the post-row mechanics and how to make your claims, and put forward your terms and conditions and get a yes from these guys through silent acquiescent admission, the world really is your oyster. You can do absolutely anything. You can negotiate absolutely anything out of these folks, and under contract law through equity, get a yes when you're sending in and doing everything correctly, with the registered post, notifying them, acting honorably as a sovereign state would, stipulating your terms and conditions, how you wish to be recognized on the roads, what this is saying, what you are doing, and if you have any protests, please let me know within 14 days. Send registered post. If they don't send anything to you that is otherwise can't be proven in court, i.e. registered post, you're invoking the UPU, right, the postal road mechanics, the post office, to say, hey, look, yes, we made sure that this mail item was delivered to this address, from this address, etc. That, they seldom really do respond to any of this. So you get a yes, right? And even if they do respond and it's not sent registered post or recorded post somehow, and that can be proved that they sent anything, they basically sent nothing. And so that's another yes, so this is so powerful. Obviously, then this same process I would use for anything and everything, even with my house. If I had a mortgage on a house, my stance is prevention is better than cure, but sometime down the line, I probably will attack mortgages. But the same principles will be in place with the house. What is a house? It's collateral, it's an asset. What is a car? It's exactly the same. It's collateral, it's an asset. It was registered through the system on the public side, under maritime admiralty law and bankruptcy. It has encumbrances. Yes, granted, it's a little bit more complicated, but no more complicated than if you got a car on finance. Okay, the same principle would be in place. But if you had your offset bond, set-off bonds, indemnity bond, security agreement, and you're controlling everything under Schedule A with that security agreement, which in my eyes is much better than a conventional trust, because you don't need three parties, you don't need to hold minutes in the meeting. All you have to do is through you alone, as the secured party creditor, acting on behalf of the debtor, which is your straw man, update the Schedule A assets of collateral that you have within that estate that you bought and using through your token piece, the Monopoly board game, that is your straw man, and making sure the public filing is reflecting what is in the security agreement and updating it that way. That for me is such a better process and a much more convenient and easier, efficient way of managing assets through this special debtor or creditor relationship, compared to a normal trust setup where you need three parties and minutes in the meetings, etc., trust indenture, etc. Okay, that security agreement is basically a trust without having the need to go through all of the processes of what's required under trust law to appease it still being considered a trust, right? Behavior must match your assertions, substance over form, etc. under equity. So, once you have this, you can then, with a mortgage, a house, no different. You got a deed of title on your home? Great. Okay, that's all the fiction color of law, colorable title under bankruptcy. What you want to do, register your own allodial title to yourself, claiming the land, go and do your own measurements, right? Meets and bounds of the plot itself, of the actual land and the house. Take a photo of that also. And then, do exactly what you see here, but just for the home, a little bit more complicated, a little bit more descriptions and details. Then you have your indemnity bond, which insures the property. You have your set-off bond, which you can use to set off the rest of the mortgage that is encumbered on the home, which is otherwise just a piece of paper that holds the deed or title and the tax plots that's otherwise held at the land registry, right? If you guys recollect, if you study Bill Turner's brilliant video, he really highlights and breaks down the simplicity of this process, right? Of what goes on, and that they're only ministering pieces of paper, not actual houses. If you actually took a photo of your home, that brings in the real substance, the land, the actual bricks, mortar, timber, the minerals, right? They can only lean pieces of paper. That's all they're doing. They're floating everything is pieces of paper. And we're all hoping through uneducation and indoctrination that we think we're dealing with the real thing when we're not. It's an overlay. This is all a bankrupt fictional overlay of the fictional seas that are raised over the lands, right? Through these papers, contracts and procedures, as we all know. So just, want to kind of give, folks out there a little bit of confidence that, go ahead and do it for your house. Do the same process. Have everything set up with your estate, and then claim an allodial title like this. Like you see a deed of title, copy, put in very detailed descriptions. What is it? What is it you wanted to claim an allodial title of? Then send to the relevant agencies of your house. And then after, give them 30 days. If they do not rebut, then you have your yes. And then from there, proceed forward. Okay, stop repaying your mortgages. Or, offer them a way to set off the remaining mortgages and say, right, you now have a allodial title to this house. what you have a lien against is otherwise a piece of paper, and that can be set off through this indemnity bond held at the Treasury. They're now my bank, jewelry, etc. Okay, guys, so I'm just kind of, helping to encourage people, because you have to enforce yourself within this system. You can't just sit back and continue contributing towards this, because even this is the same process proven that it is successful with a private conveyance, and it completely wipes off their database. You can do exactly the same with anything and everything that we rightfully own within this system of any value, which is normally just houses and cars, big ticket items. They're kind of the main ones, right? Thinking of ownership anyway, you can't own anything. Earth is a being. It can't really be owned, it's just shared. But yeah, we have custodianship, guardianship of certain lands. I think is important. That certainly you remove it from their bankruptcy, and I think that's the most important thing. So you can stipulate your own terms and conditions, because otherwise you have to start paying taxes. Taxes is basically the rent for us to give the right for us to use what we think we own. Is just disguised as taxes for that use, which is rent. And so yeah, you can hopefully draw inspiration from this, but otherwise thought to update you folks, which is quite interesting. So now I'm going to have to go through re-registering if I want to then bring this car from the private back into the public. Okay, so whether this works, depending on where you are, there might be different nuances in relation to this, in regards to time periods as well, and what the processes are behind that. But I guarantee it'll be much the same, because everything is under Admiralty Maritime bankruptcy, and we're dealing in colours of title and not allodial title. So yeah, there you go, folks, and hopefully a good little reminder, little recap, little revision of the power of what we're doing here with the post-road mechanics, and issuing our own title and gaining agreement out of them through silent acquiescent admission, and then making sure our estate, once your estate is set up with the security agreement, you perfected that in the UCC and PPSR, depending on where you are. Always get the UCC one done. If you're in a place that has the PPSR, get that done also. And then issue your indemnity bond, your set-off bond, have them perfected on the UCC as well, under the same security agreement as collateral under Schedule A. The world is your oyster. From then, it's just a matter of what do you want to claim in this life that you want to send in to dictate your terms and conditions. And that's as simple as that, guys, honestly. And obviously, because we are kind of acting in this trustee, this on talk capacity, it's the best of the worst situation we're in until such time we crack the code of liquidating the estate completely and moving into the private and being recognized privately in a private capacity, which is obviously a given name, right? A born identity, and banking within their system. So be able to interface in the commercial realm without any bankrupt, ens legis, fictional, public debtor, pledged as collateral entity. And that's obviously what I found out with the Committee of 300 documents showing the off-ledger activity, which is basically their way of saying, the private side of the ledger, where they're dealing in, juridicillions and actual gold, which is back in every central bank. On the private side of the ledger, on the public side, they're dealing in trillions, might be a lot to a lot of people, but to them it's nothing. On the private side, they're dealing with juridicillions, bank accounts that are in the hundreds of digits, which is beyond juridicillion. I think that's 49, 50 digits, right? And every single one of those accounts are backed by eternal life guaranteed US dollar deposits or something, making 4% per annum. So until such time we learn to liquidate the estate, this is the best situation we have in controlling our estate, and being able to issue our own terms and conditions and actually remove things from the public and bring it into the private, as we see, quite literally, where to the point they delete it from their database. All right, so there's your proof, guys. Anyway, hope you stay safe out there, have fun, study hard, and as always, stay sovereign. Peace out. Speak soon.